I'm here with Brandi Ferguson from the McKenzie River Trust, and I wish we could be speaking under happier circumstances. I know that the holiday farm fire has really been tough, both for both of our organizations as well as the community. So thanks for making time to talk with us today.
Well, thank you, Jared. Appreciate the opportunity just to share our piece of this story, the partnering of the organizations and how that came together. And then also just the fact that this is a very real story for all of us. We all live here, we all work here, we all choose to call this place home beyond our work for the organizations we represent. But this is very real for everybody, and we know many people that have been directly impacted.
So for the McKenzie River Trust, you know, this is your home ground. This is your home valley for your organization. And this fire brought our two organizations together around this shared interest in both the people and the landscape of the McKenzie Valley. So what did that feel like to you guys as an organization, or to you personally, when you started hearing the news about the fire?
People, as I said before, that we know closely. I mean, for the organization, we've been around since McKenzie River Trust was founded in 1989. And during this time, we've had the privilege of really getting to know closely people that live up and down the river corridor, that are supporters of our organization, whether financially and or as volunteers of our organization over the decades. More recently, you know, we've purchased a property upriver called Rock Reach a few years ago, and including the Rock boat landing, and have created a volunteer group called the Friends of Rock, which for the most part was a group of volunteers that lived in Blue River, and many of which lost their homes. Just one example of just the close relationships of you know, people working with people. Yes, we're a nonprofit local land conservation group working to care for this river that we all share, but we're doing it on behalf of the community that we share too, and that is what it's all about. It changed our lives forever. Whether we live upriver, midriver, downriver, this river connects us, and it's very real for us all.
We certainly appreciated that McKenzie River Trust reached out to United Way early on to talk about really collaborating, and we launched, as you know, our Wildfire Response Fund a couple days after the fire hit, and you all were generous enough to really promote the fund with your membership. And, you know, I was really struck by just the expression of care that the community put forth. You know, the Wildfire Response Fund raised almost $400,000 in the first week, and you know, it just really took off because I think people care about their neighbors upriver, their neighbors in the fire-affected community, as well as the landscape. I was just struck by the outpouring of support here locally, nationally as well, but particularly just so many people wanting to step up and do whatever they can to support our neighbors, because we haven't lived through something like this in Lane County.
You know, this unique position that we found as an organization ourselves in, with the relationships both with people up and down river, but also with local businesses in town that suddenly, well, we have this wonderful business supporter program. So we have these long relationships with local businesses that in the end, when we heard of needs upriver, urgent needs that were needing to be met, we were able to pick up the phone and just make a call directly to the owner of a local business and say, hey, this is the need, can you help? And every single time they're like, yes, when do you need me? When do you need us? When can we be there for you and for this community? And so having those established relationships and just having the opportunity to have cultivated and connected people and businesses to this river that we all share. I mean, it was, yeah, we've never experienced a disaster like this in our community, but in a lot of ways, you know, we weren't all prepared, right? We were learning. This is new, but at least we had those established relationships to be able to tap.
One of the lessons for me from this fire is that the relationships that we have with each other, both organizationally and personally, are really what we're going to lean into when there's a disaster like this. And, you know, as United Way, we've had a relationship with some of the organizations that serve some of the most vulnerable families up in the Blue River and the upriver area, like the McKenzie River Food Pantry and the school district there, the Blue River Health Clinic, and the McKenzie Community Development Corporation. I think understanding some of the really critical organizations that were up there allowed us to try to get some resources out initially to try to reach the families. You know, there's different needs that are happening upriver compared to, you know, all the people that are in town now, either because they can't go home yet, or maybe they don't have a place to go home to, or it's unclear when they'll be able to return home. But just those relationships are so important to lean on in times of disaster.
In talking about the United Way Lane County Wildfire Relief Fund and our organizations and helping in the beginning raise money for that solely, and just being able to watch how quickly United Way was able to get dollars directly to the community within a week after the fire was just amazing to be able to watch, and because, you know, the need wasn't weeks down the road, it was days, it was immediate in a lot of ways. And to be able to see that fund working so quickly to help meet the varying needs that would change almost by the hour, sometimes it felt like. Obviously, you know, as we're moving forward with more planning and more strategy for both midterm and long-term recovery, you know, that's a whole nother thing. And but those first, you know, couple of weeks with so many unknowns and so many people in need, so many families and communities, it was wonderful to see how fast you know, especially you, Jared, being, you know, from this community. I mean, you were an amazing champion, and United Way really stepped up in a big way to help, and you were very thankful to be a part of that at the level that we were.
I know you guys at McKenzie River Trust, speaking of this kind of pivot that we're making at this point from being in the immediate relief and response stage of the disaster and now moving towards a little bit more thinking about recovery and looking towards the winter. I know you guys have really thought about different roles your staff can play. So tell us a little bit about how you've thought about roles that your staff can play in this transition to thinking about long-term recovery or midterm recovery through the winter.
Sure. Well, as far as McKenzie River Trust, one thing that we're really involved with right now is the Pure Water Partners program, which is a program that EWEB has actually been operating for quite a few years, partnering with local landowners along the McKenzie as far as bringing education and resources around, you know, caring for their piece of the edge of the McKenzie River. And having that program already in place and a very large amount that they had in that program help, you know, after the wildfire, be able to pivot that organization or that program and collectively bring both the McKenzie River Trust. We have 3 staff dedicated to helping with assessments, as well as the McKenzie Watershed Council and the Upper Soil and Water Conservation District are all helping with assessments and help, meeting with landowners. Of course, is a very much a willing opt-in program, and walking their property and looking at possibility of erosion issues, hazard trees, hazards of things when the rains come, of things going into the river. So that's happening right now, boots on the ground right now, in whatever way we can bring our resources and knowledge to the landowners collectively. And so that's a big piece of what's happening.
Well, thank you guys for doing that. I know, you know, as United Way, we tend to be thinking about the human impacts of a event like this, but obviously there are these tremendous environmental impacts as well. And I know you guys are working really hard on that in partnership with a lot of those other organizations you mentioned. So one of the more recent grants that United Way made, we made some grants early on to some of those immediate needs. And I mentioned the food pantry and the health clinic. And we were also providing some grants to some organizations in town that were working with victims that had been displaced with services like crisis counseling and access to emergency food and including some direct financial support to households. And as we've started looking at the midterm recovery and where we can be good stewards of the funds the community has invested in it, one of the things we invested in recently were the relief stations. And I know this is a series of community hubs that have been sort of stood up along the river, starting down in maybe even in Walterville and going all the way up to Rainbow and McKenzie Bridge. And we're really happy United Way got to provide some support to staffing those, because I know they've been just run by community volunteers and very grassroots, neighbors helping neighbors type of thing. So I know you've visited some of the relief stations. So what have you seen at those relief stations?
Yeah, this is an amazing example of a resilient community, specifically McKenzie Community Development Corporation, which is a nonprofit all ran by volunteers, upriver group of people that have been working together as leaders in the upriver community to do good to the economy there and life in Blue River, in the Upper River area. And this group has also stepped up during this time to not only help with immediate urgent needs, but also midterm and long-term recovery, essentially helping to rebuild Blue River and just collectively try to bring together all the entities, all the voices, all the businesses that have been impacted, and be able to share what their needs are and what their vision is for their community. And a lot of these people on the board of the McKenzie CDC were directly impacted themselves. Some of them also lost their houses, and it's been amazing to watch them step up and put community first before their own needs. And I think, again, that's just an amazing example of the resiliency of this community, and how we can help support them as they're moving forward as well. So yes, the relief centers, the CDC is hosting or operating relief centers on both sides of the fire. On the west side at the historic hatchery or McKenzie Discovery Center, there's a Vital Relief Center that has a food pantry and an information center as well that actually personally I've been volunteering at a fair amount. And so that's been really useful, as well as the upriver at the McKenzie School. There's a very large space there with food and clothing and different resources and information as well. Essentially, the concern, of course, is when the rains come and possible landslides that could close Highway 126. As we all know, there's one way in and one way out, and if that happens in different areas of concern, people could be cut off, families could be cut off that have been able to return back to their homes or are living in RVs or whatever the situation might be. And so the CDC's really stepped up to try to prepare for those possibilities by having these food pantries, as well as there was also one at the Upper McKenzie Community Center that was really a grassroots group that came together and made that happen, that the CDC is helping to support now. And then there'll also be two trailers, covered trailers with food and water that will mobile trailers that'll be located at two of the fire stations, one at Vida and one at Nimrod as well. That again, just those possibility of the winter ahead and just unknowns and wanting to be prepared.
It's really been just impressive. I've been seeing it through Facebook or the McKenzie River Reflections newspaper, and just all these different stories of that community, as you said, just demonstrating tremendous resilience, and so many community leaders stepping up and everyone thinking about how they can do their part to help each other out to get through this. So is there anything else we should talk about while we're here together?
Well, I think really and appreciating the time again just to talk through this and what we've been able to observe and experience and be a part of, but also just remembering that this is the beginning. This is a very long road ahead for the upriver community, mid-river community, and just remembering that if we could all remember that you know, the fund with the United Way was a huge help in the beginning and will continue to be a huge piece of this recovery, but this is a very long road, as I said, and making sure that we, you know, are still committed and still listening and still remembering and still able to step up when needed to you know, help support and move forward. Yeah, I think it's easy, you know, when the smoke lifted in the valley, suddenly you think, oh, you know, it's a little sense of normalcy, but for many families it's not, and it won't be for a long time. So
Yeah, that's a great point, Brandi. So thank you for that as sort of a closing thought. So thanks for your time, and thank you for everything McKenzie River Trust is doing. It's been great to get to have our two organizations working together and trying to find ways to come alongside and support the community that's been most affected by these fires. So thanks for taking some time today.
thanks, Jared.